That's true. Yeah, because it's expected. Yep. Welcome everyone. We're not going to start yet. This is just a mic check, so don't keep talking. Did I see the Welshes are running in long distance races on Facebook? Is that what I said? Yeah. It's a sure sign of something wrong up here when you want to run that far. Hey, Victor. Good to see you. You want them to start eating now? Oh, okay. Yeah. Oh, yeah. I don't think they understood that. So, because no one's moving. Amen. I'm amazed that so many people turned out on a holiday weekend. So I assume Lynette scheduled it now just to test your commitment. And for those who were here the first time and didn't come back, we will duly shame them if they come back for any of the others. But thank you for coming. Couple things before we get started. I want to let you know of an apologetics conference that we're hosting at the college in August. It's a Friday afternoon and all day Saturday. It's $69 for 2 days, or I think $49 for just Saturday if you can only make it Saturday. But in addition to me, Matt Lee, who's one of our professors at the college, has his PhD in apologetics from Southern Baptist Theological Seminary. He just moved back here from Korea after serving 10 years in a church there. And he heads up our Master Divinity program. And then Welton Bonner is a former student of mine who has an amazing testimony. He's a church planner in Washington, D.C. right now, finishing up 6 months of an internship at Capitol Hill Baptist Church in Washington, D.C. He's a D.C. native. In his own testimony, he tells how God saved him when he was in jail for the fourth time as the son of a pastor dealing drugs. And God finally got a hold of his heart, transformed his life. I met him 10 years ago when he came to Lancaster Bible College, and he has an amazing testimony, very bold witness for Christ and church planting in some of the most difficult areas in Washington, D.C. He's also a hip-hop artist, so multi-talented, and he's going to share his testimony at the conference and also speak. I'm not sure on what the topic is yet. But we also have a whole lineup of workshop sessions those days. Some of the people you might know, some not. Los just agreed to do a workshop session. He may regret that once he gets time to think about it. But we have a couple of scientists who are going to be presenting. One of our scientists just retired as the chief scientist at Dow Chemical. He has something like 75 patents to his name and has mentored 42 PhDs at Dow Chemical, and he was the science laureate at the entire company of tens of thousands of employees. So he's a wonderful Christian man who does apologetics. We've got some amazing other speakers as well. So if you can come, if you can tell others about it, it's on my website, I believe. If you look at the bottom of the handout, Apologetics for the Church, we'd love to have you join us. Also, I'm launching a new initiative. I don't know if it'll work. It may flop. But a few years ago, I read a famous quote by atheist David Foster Wallace. And in a commencement speech in 2005, almost 20 years ago, he made a famous statement. As a lifelong atheist, he said, there's actually no such thing as atheism. There's no such thing as not worshiping. Everyone worships. And he went on to talk about that. Even as an atheist, he realized you find your significance somewhere. So I'm launching a new T-shirt line, Everyone Worships. And then the quote on the back from David Foster Wallace, and I'll have hats and things like that. But it's a .org website. You can see .org down here. This is going to be used, and you'll be able to go on to a site like Custom Ink or Printify, print off whatever color you want and size and all that stuff. But I'm starting next week, I'll start using this in my conversations with unbelievers to see if it raises questions. Well, what do you mean everyone worships? And this takes you to a website that walks through David Foster Wallace's speech on everyone worships. There's no such thing as atheism. So that'll hopefully be up in another week or two, and I'll talk more about it next time. But would love to help Christians have more natural ways to start conversations with people. I also have stickers and things like that. I have one of the stickers here on my laptop already. Everyone worships. And any way you can help to start conversations with unbelievers is more naturally is a big help in getting conversations started.
What color shirts do you have?
Well, right now, I mean, I only ordered enough for me and my immediate family, but you'll be able to go on a website, order whatever color you want. Yeah. And you'll be able to custom choose. These are all cotton. You can use cotton poly blend. So some of these websites, you go on, you pick your T-shirt, and they will put it on there. And I think there's like a minimum of 6 as for an order, so you can get people together, order them. I'll have hats as well, things like that. So tonight we're talking about pulling down strongholds. I told you last time, when we covered last time, 1 Peter 3:15 and 16, how are we to go about engaging unbelievers? We covered Romans 1, what God says is going on in the heart and mind of every unbeliever. They know the truth of God, and they suppress it. Tonight, we're going to look at what does it actually look like then when you have a conversation with an unbeliever. How do you do that? Because most Christians I know really want to reach the lost, but they struggle with this idea. And I think what we covered last time is foundational. If I know that every unbeliever knows God and is suppressing the truth, then I know I'm talking to someone about something they know about, even if it's subconsciously, they're well aware of their guilt and of God's coming judgment. That's what Romans 1 says. But if you have your Bibles tonight, turn to 2 Corinthians chapter 10. 2 Corinthians chapter 10, Paul talks about the power of the gospel to tear down or to pull down strongholds of unbelief. And Paul uses some powerful warfare vocabulary here, language here, that reminds us that when we are talking with an unbeliever, it is a spiritual battle of beliefs. I'm trying to expose that person's beliefs as faulty, as contradictory, as irrational, as unlivable, and I'm trying to present Christ as the only true alternative. So 2 Corinthians chapter 10, beginning in verse 3, Paul says, "For though we walk in the flesh, we are not waging war according to the flesh." So we are embodied souls in this world. We live in a physical world. So we don't take up arms against one another in or against the unbeliever in the battle to see them won to Christ. We don't have a jihad that we take up and fight with physical weapons. Paul says, "For the weapons of our warfare are not of the flesh, but they have divine power to destroy strongholds." That's what we want to unpack tonight. Verse 5, "We destroy arguments and every lofty opinion raised against the knowledge of God, and we take every thought captive to obey Christ." So when you think about how a lot of apologetics is done, it is often done this way. The unbeliever, brings his objection, and you rise to meet that objection, and you go head to head like mountain goats, right? Here's my objection, here's my answers. Here's another objection. And if you've ever had that kind of conversation, it can be frustrating. If you're talking to someone who's really knowledgeable, it can be intimidating. And many times you'll walk away thinking, I don't know if I made a dent in this person. So the approach that we're going to talk about tonight, there's a wonderful metaphor for it, pulling the rug out from under their feet. So if I'm going toe-to-toe with someone and I'm about to engage them in combat, if I can pull the rug out from underneath them, take out their feet, take out their legs, then they have nothing to stand on to fight with. And that's kind of the approach that we want to think about. Rather than going head-to-head with the unbeliever, I'm going to do a few things that undermine right off the bat their confidence in what they believe, and that makes them more open to hear what I have to say. So if you have your handout, let's notice, first of all, I want to challenge the authority of the non-Christian's belief system. That is, I want to go to the heart of what are they trusting in? What are they resting in? And George and I were talking a little bit before. In my common experience, this is not 100% true, but quite often when I'm talking to an unbeliever and they begin to raise challenges against the Christian faith, if I begin to ask some questions, very quickly, they run out of good answers for why they believe what they believe. They will often say, well, I don't really know. I just believe that, or I've always believed that. And that sometimes rattles them to have to admit that and have to say that. And it always builds up my confidence. I'm not talking to someone who has, most of the time, a very settled worldview and their beliefs are all fleshed out. They've researched them all. That's so rare. On occasion, you find someone like that, but I would say it's probably less than 5% of the people that you'll meet. So what we want to do then is when we're in conversation with an unbeliever, we want to ask questions that force the person to reveal the foundations of their beliefs. And we want to do this gently and with respect. Remember 1 Peter 3:15 and 16. But I am gently forcing. If you've ever been to a chiropractor before, there's two kinds of chiropractors. You know, cross your leg over here, reach over here. And with great violence, one of my first chiropractors was a former Marine. He'd get you in this, he'd have you lay in this position, and all of a sudden, with great force, he'd throw his body on you and jerk your whole body. And, people that, fiddle with your neck and do all that kind of stuff. I go to a chiropractor now. She's very gentle. She has you lay down. She just begins to push gently on certain parts of your spine. And I found that to be much less traumatic as a person. So if you were to say, Mark, what does it look like when you're talking to an unbeliever? What does that conversation look like? This is essentially all I do at first. I ask questions that get to the heart of what they believe. Now, I've spent years developing these questions. They're patented, so every time you use one of these, please go online and pay the these are so common sense that most of the time people say, you had to go to school to learn that? Because that seems pretty common sense. But truthfully, I did have to go to school to learn that by asking questions many times, you can undermine people's confidence in what they believe far more than just saying, no, you're wrong. I know you're wrong, and you need to change. Asking questions invites people into conversations. So something like this, what do you mean by that? It's a simple question. So if I'm talking to someone and they say, I just, I'm not religious at all. I really don't care. I find religious people to be just rude. What do you mean by that? Have you had religious people be rude to you before? I'm sorry to hear that. Well, I'm not defending religion. I want to talk to you about Jesus. Very important thing. Don't ever try to defend religion. We're not defending religion. We're trying to present Christ. But asking a question and inviting that person to answer, I have found time and time again, invites people into a conversation that they're willing to carry on. Here's another one. Why do you believe that? Well, I just think all religions are the same. Don't argue. No, they're not. Yes, they are. No, they're not. Ask them, why do you believe that? Have you studied world religions? Most of the time, well, no, it's just my impression. Oh, okay. Well, can I share with you some very big differences between Christianity and other religions? Or maybe they have studied world religions and then say, well, tell me what you think are the similarities, and do you think there are any differences? In other words, I'm just going to ask questions, and let that person do all the talking initially. I think last time I talked about the game of Foursquare. Remember in elementary school? My goal is always initially to, whenever the ball comes into my court and they ask me a question, I'm going to push the ball back into their court. Because if I can, here's what's happening. I'm trying to present Christ to them. But they have their own worldview that which they think is secure, can answer all the problems of life, answer all the questions. But if I can start asking questions that make that start to diminish, where they start to say, that's a good question, I'm not sure how that works. Or I guess that was a contradiction of what I said before. You begin to rattle their confidence in their belief. That's what Paul's talking about, pulling down a stronghold. Think about every unbeliever you meet every day throughout all their lives. They are building up opposition to the truth of God through overt rebellion of the heart, through establishing strategies in life that help them get through, that are, that hide the sin or magnify the sin or lead them to despair or lead them to pride. And every day they're building up this fortress against the truth of the gospel. So what I want to do by asking questions is just start pulling down those blocks one at a time so the light of the gospel begins to shine in. Sometimes I also use a Jenga set to picture this. When I'm talking to someone, when you put a Jenga set together and all the blocks are there, it looks formidable. But you begin looking for weak spots, and you poke out that block, and over time, the more you do that, their belief system starts to waver a bit, seems less secure. And they sense that too. Like, here's this Christian, they're challenging me on things, and I don't have answers for them, and yet they seem to have answers. They seem to have hope and joy and peace, and I know I don't have those. Here's another question. How do you know that? Again, these are all just varieties of the same question. I'm gently pushing back and challenging them to provide justification for their beliefs, arguments for their beliefs. How do you know that? Well, we don't really know what Jesus said because all his original sayings were lost. Oh, interesting. Don't argue against him. Just say, tell me about that. Where did you hear that? Well, I read it on the internet. Oh, okay. Well, can I share some facts about the New Testament with you or the Gospels with you? And that's where the more we learn about these things, we have some things to draw on. But if you can show them that they can't provide answers to your questions, they are less demanding that you provide the answers. What do you base that on? Well, in my experience, Christians just are people who just need a crutch in life. Interesting. Okay. What do you base that on? Have you talked to Christians and have they said that, or has that just been your observation? I mean, you'd be surprised how much questions cause people to rethink the things that they're dogmatic about. Here's another one. How have you come to that conclusion? Well, I think Jesus was a wonderful teacher, but I think he was just a wandering sage and just loved people and all that. Well, how'd you come to that? Have you read the Gospels? Well, no, but, I've heard of a few verses like judge not that you be not judged and love your neighbor as yourself. And, that's there. That's in the Bible. But there's more to it than that. A few years ago when I was going through chemotherapy for cancer, and I was over at the cancer center, and was really feeling sick. I think it was my 5th or 6th chemo, and by that time the cancer was almost gone, but I was 50 pounds lighter, no hair, just really trying to survive through every day. And I was at the cancer center, and there was a man that was walking around to all the rooms. I always thought, when you got cancer, it's like in the movies, you sit around with people and everyone's hooked up to their IV, and you're playing cards and talking. Like, I look forward to that. I'm an extrovert. Put me in a room full of people, I'm having a great time, even if it's with chemo. Instead, they put you isolated in these little rooms, and I thought, this is a bummer. And I had a chance to witness to my nurses and things like that. But this guy came around, he was a volunteer. And he was just going around talking to people, wonderful thing. And I had a theology book there, and he said, oh, a theology book. And I said, yeah, I teach at Lancaster Bible College. And he said, oh, that's so interesting. He said, yeah, I really admire Jesus, all those things he said, like love your neighbor. And I think that's, such a wonderful thing. I said, well, yeah, that was part of his message, but do you believe that the rest of what he said is also true? He said, well, like what? I said, like he's the only way to God, and those who reject him will, enter everlasting punishment. And then he changed tactics. He said, well, we don't really even know if he ever said those things. I said, okay, so you believe that he said the things you like about him, but you don't believe he said the things you don't like.
Right.
He said, yeah, kind of. I said, well, and I wasn't feeling good that day, so I was a little bit on the cranky side. I said, well, if I wasn't a Christian, I would have no respect for Jesus. He kind of looked at me like, why would you say that? I said, because he said these things. He said that he's the only way to God. He said that everyone must come to him by salvation, and he claimed to be God in the flesh. And if he isn't who he says he is, then he's a lunatic, and we should have no respect for him. And he kind of like took a sniff. And I waited to see what he said, and I said, it's not intellectually honest to only pick and choose the things you like about Jesus. Yeah. And he said, I think I need to go and perhaps read the Gospels again. I said, you should. And then I prayed for him and asked God to forgive me for being not so nice about it. But ask that question. How have you come to that conclusion? Where did you get that idea? All these, again, you're not going to have enough spaces in your notes to write them all down. But if you were to listen in with me talking to an unbeliever, I do a lot of this for the first 10, 15, 20 minutes, just asking them about what they believe. Our temptation is we want to rush in and blurt out the gospel. I think in the intro or the first chapter of my book, I talk about the gospel burp. We just want to get it all out. Excuse me, sir. No, for sure, if you die today, you're going to go to heaven. Can I tell you God loves you, fallen into sin? Jesus Christ died on the cross for you. If you could just believe in him, you could be saved. It's a gospel burp because you feel better and that person is offended. So what we have to learn to do is relax. The Holy Spirit is the one who converts. If I can show interest in this person first, draw them out about what they believe, make them begin to doubt what they believe or question, why don't I really know this stuff? Then they're going to be more open to when I do present Christ clearly. Here's another one. Who said that? Well, don't you know that science has disproved Christianity? Oh, interesting. I haven't heard that. Tell me, where did you read that? Who said that? And what do you mean that science has disproved Christianity? Is that source reliable? Well, my cousin studied at a seminary for 1 year. Okay, that's the alarm bells right there. First-year Bible college students, first-year seminary students are the most dangerous people in the world. Kind of like first-year medical students, probably. Everyone says, oh, Billy, your mother's having a problem. Come over and, solve it. I'm just in my first year of medical school. Most doctors have more humility than first-year Bible college students. Can you give me an example of that? Well, there's so many mistakes in the Bible. Can you give me an example? And sometimes they do. They come up with an example and they share that, and you are able to explain, actually, this is not a mistake. Here's the real answer for that. I think I shared with you last time about the guy in the plane, the soldier. Did I share that story with you? Sorry, I tell the same stories over and over again. Okay, all right. So I was on a flight a few years ago from Raleigh, North Carolina, up to Philadelphia, and I sat next to a soldier on the plane. If this is ringing a bell, nod your head. You already heard this. Okay. So I'm sitting next to him. He was an extrovert. I'm an extrovert. So we talked the entire time, which is my best kind of airplane flight. I just like to talk to people. And I was not always this way. I was very shy as a young person. And we got talking. He was funny, telling all these jokes. And finally, he turned to me and he said, so what do you do? He sold insurance or something. And I said, at the time, I was a seminary professor at a small school in Philadelphia. He goes, oh, yeah. Yeah, I really need to get back to church. Have you ever heard that before? You tell people you're a Christian. Sorry for swearing. I really need to get back to church. And he said, I got a question for you. He said, I really admire Jesus and the example. I think he had actually read the Bible. And he said, except for that one time he sinned, he was truly an amazing man. I said, say what now? He said, that one time Jesus sinned. I said, I'm not sure what you're talking about. He's like, that one time. I said, no. I said, can you think of what are you thinking of when you think that Jesus sinned? And he thought about it for a moment. He said, he said, well, when he turned the water into wine, didn't he snap at his mother and lose his temper? I said, no, he was firm with his mother and said it was not his time to start revealing his power, but then he went ahead and did the miracle anyways. And he said, so he didn't sin then? I said, no. He said, I'm really glad you cleared that up for me. And it was amazing how, and we'll talk about this in a moment, how many mistaken ideas and notions people have about Christianity, about the scriptures, about Jesus, that if we take the time to ask questions, we can help them work that out. What was interesting is after that, his tone all of a sudden changed. And he got real serious. And he said, we did some really bad things over there in Iraq. I didn't know what to say, so I didn't say anything. He said I was part of a forward operating base guarding a larger base, and we had suicide bombers in the area. And so he said we were given orders to shoot men at 100 yards if they would not stop coming toward us after repeated warnings, because some of them were blowing themselves up in the guard shack. I thought, oh man, that's really heavy. And then he said we had orders to shoot women at 75 yards. Guess what comes next? And he said, how could God ever forgive me for what I did over there? And I thought, how interesting that this conversation about Jesus clearing up this misconception turned into him unburdening his heart. Thinking, how long has this man carried this burden about what he did? I imagine when he got on the plane, he wasn't thinking, I got to share this with someone. But it's because we were willing to talk about God, about the Christian faith, that he opened up. And you have to be ready for that. You have no idea once you begin talking to someone. You might get strong opposition. Yeah. Another time on a plane, I started talking to a guy who's like, sorry, I consider religion to be personal and private. So if you want to talk about sports, we can do that, but I don't like to talk about religion. And I wasn't quick enough. I should have said, sports are really personal to me. I don't like to talk about that in public. I wasn't that quick on my feet. But engaging people in conversation and not being in a rush to get right to Christ. First, spend a little time with them. Yeah. Where are they spiritually? And you know what that's done for me? Because for years of my life, I was terrified of rejection. I took it so personally. And what God finally began to do to change my heart was between junior and senior year of college, worked as a pastoral intern, and my pastor made me go around. This is out in Wisconsin. Made me go around and knock on every door in 2 different towns and invite people to church. It was, to me, it was like dying. Like, I've got to talk to these people. They're going to close the door in my face. It was awful. This is back in the 80s. He made me wear a suit, so I had my jacket and tie on, going around in the heat of Wisconsin summer, 95% humidity. It was awful, but God began to help me to get over my fear of rejection at that point. But if you ask questions and engage people in conversation, this takes a lot of the burden off you. And rather than rushing right into a gospel presentation, you take the time to ask them about what they believe. You'd be amazed what that does to disarm people. So what we want to do then, once they begin telling us what they believe or giving these answers, we want to challenge arguments against the Christian worldview. So notice then, I want to test. Well, here's a few authorities that people believe in very quickly. Some people believe in science. And they think science has opposition to the Christian faith. And actually what is stated here, only what can be observed is fact, religion is faith, not knowledge. That's not really science, it's scientism, a belief that science has all the answers. A few years ago in Britain, there was an advertising campaign promoting atheism. Here was one of the advertisements on the side of a bus. There's probably no God, so stop worrying and enjoy your life. What question would you want to ask someone if they said that to you? What's the word that you would question? Probably. Okay. All right, so what if there is? But there's another word that's a problem in this as well. Worrying. Okay, worrying. Yeah, that's good. That's the first time anyone's ever said that, but you're right. And enjoy. Is that all life is just enjoyment? What happens when things go wrong? Whether there's a God or not makes a big difference then. Here's another one, quote by Katharine Hepburn. I'm an atheist and that's it. I believe there's nothing we can know except that we should be kind to each other and do what we can for other people. What would you want to ask a person that said that? Why? That's right. Why do what we can for other people? And why do you believe that that's the only thing we can know? You're eliminating all other knowledge except this. So how did you, Katharine Hepburn, ascend the mountains of humanity and look down on all the rest of us who think we can know things, and you've attained this knowledge that this is the only thing we can know? This is a trick philosophers play a lot. They climb the mountain and say, here's the way it is. And people say, well, how'd you get there? Never mind that. It's kind of like The Wizard of Oz. Remember that horrific movie, the psychedelic nightmare that came out in the 1960s or so? And Dorothy and the Tin Man and the Lion and the Scarecrow and Toto, they make it to the Wizard of Oz. They get there, and it's a big face in the wall. It's shouting at them. And Toto runs over and pulls the curtain away. And you discover that the Wizard of Oz is just a little old man at a control panel moving levers back and forth. He's nothing to be afraid of. When you begin to think about asking people questions, what you find is very quickly you can unmask their confidence and their belief and often realize there's not much there. They don't really have good explanations for why they believe what they believe. Here's another one. You can be good without God. What would you want to ask someone who would say that? What is good? How do you define good? Well, it's what everybody thinks we ought to do. Well, no, people disagree on that. There's not a universal consensus on that. What's that? Well, there is. Yeah, that's right. And then the question comes in, if I can be good without God, atheists will sometimes say this, you can be a good atheist without religion. Okay. What do you mean by good? Are you borrowing Christian ideals of good? Because they'll often say this, I don't lie, I don't steal, I don't commit adultery. Yeah. My response is, why are you borrowing the Christian morals to judge yourself? That seems like they're inescapable. The founder of the Lancaster Free Thought Society, the local atheist group, a few years ago was an acquaintance of mine. He used to come into my apologetics class at the end of every semester, and I would let him have free reign with the students after I gave them enough training. And one time the students asked him, do you believe in right and wrong? He said, no, I don't. He said, I don't believe in right and wrong. I just believe we know what helps society to flourish. And one of the students said, so if someone was threatening your wife and children, would you think that was wrong? He was trying to be consistent. He said, well, I don't think it's wrong. I just think we know that's not how society works together well. And then one of them asked him, would you sacrifice yourself to save your wife and kids? He said, I don't know. I thought, I wonder if his wife knows that he says that.
She probably sacrificed him when she heard of it.
She probably did. Actually, 3 years ago, they divorced. I don't know if that was the reason why, but he was trying to maintain a morality, a consistent morality, and you just can't apart from the Christian God. There are universal longings, we'll talk about that in a little while, that we cannot escape. Some people trust in reason. Only what the mind and society deem to be reasonable is true. But that's different for every person. For some, it's philosophy. Only what intellectuals and academic institutions hold can be true. And I would tell you, after teaching philosophy the last 10 years, philosophers admittedly do not agree on a single point of anything. Famous European philosopher Peter von Inwagen says after 3,000 years of philosophy, there's no agreement on any one point in philosophy. So people think philosophers will help us. They're as confused as we are. And then some people rely on their religion. Sincerity in your belief is all that God, however you conceive him, requires. So once I start asking people questions about what they believe, what do I do next? Well, I begin to then challenge arguments against a Christian worldview. When they say, well, how can there, and we'll deal with this next time we meet, how can there be a good God when there's so much evil and suffering in the world? I need to be prepared to give an answer to that. And the truth is there's no way to always be prepared for every possible objection that comes up. But if you are aware of the most common ones, and if you're in a relationship with a friend that's ongoing, then you know what their questions are, and you can work to find answers. The first thing I want to do is I want to test the consistency and livability of his worldview. That is it consistent? Is it rational? Is it contradictory? Can it be lived? So in the introduction to my book, I tell the story about the first woman I ever tried to put apologetics into practice with. And she, as I asked these questions, again, hardly knowing anything at this point, she kept going back and saying, well, I guess that contradicts what I said before. And I was amazed. I'm just asking her questions, and she's giving up her beliefs one after the other. That will happen sometimes as you ask people, wait a minute, that really contradicts what you said before. You said there was no designer, right? We have no purpose in life. We're just accidents of nature. But then you turn around and say we should treat one another with dignity. That's a contradiction. You can't have an accident that you treat with dignity. And then what you can say is, I think you're right about the dignity. I think your intuition that we ought to treat one another with dignity is a right one. But that makes sense in a Christian worldview, not in your worldview. And what you're doing when you do that is, again, it's like Jenga. You're just poking out belief after belief after belief. And they start to sense things are not as secure as they used to be. Also, livability. Can we really live this way? My friend at the Free Thought Society used to say, we don't need any morals. We don't need 10 commandments. We just need a moral of empathy. Just have empathy toward one another. I said, but that's not enough, because some people think, my grandma is older and ill, so I'm going to show empathy and put her out of her misery. And another person would say, no, empathy would be to care for her until death takes her. Like, empathy, that's not enough. That's not livable. We need more than just that vague ethic. Here's another one, call his bluff. Sometimes people will bluff. They'll say things that you think, that doesn't sound right. This friend at the Free Thought Society said to my class one time, don't you know? He says to them, do you all believe that just as the Bible describes, the people of Israel came out of Egypt, 3 million people, and they crossed the Red Sea and made their way to the edge of the Promised Land? Do you believe that? All the students said yes. I was proud of that moment. And he said, don't you know that area is about the size of Rhode Island? And by the time the first people reached the end of the beginning of the Promised Land, the last people wouldn't even be through the Red Sea. And I could see the students thinking, oh man, what do we say to that? And so I would never participate. I just let them talk back and forth, and then we would debrief later. And so while he was talking, I looked that up, and turns out that area is much, much bigger than the state of Rhode Island. And I said, on the other hand, I used to live just a few miles from the Rhode Island border, and there's 800,000 people living in Rhode Island, and when you drive through, it looks abandoned. So to say that millions of people couldn't fit in that space, that's patently untrue, because 800,000 people are rattling around, and we could easily fit millions in there. So call their bluff. If they say something and you think, that doesn't sound right, push them on that. Where do you get that from? Where did you get that idea from? Can you verify that? Who said that? Here's another one. Correct his misconceptions about the Christian faith. Don't ever assume that the person you're talking to understands the gospel clearly and just rejects it, or that they understand Christianity clearly. I've had people say, well, Christianity is just about rules. You people just love rules. I said, you really think that's what Christianity is about? Yes. And I had to say, that's not what it's about. Can I share with you the story of Christ? Because many people have misconceptions, or they may have heard from someone who's a Christian who doesn't know how to explain their faith, or a professing Christian, and they say, well, Christianity is all about being a good person. So don't assume that person you are talking to understands properly the Christian faith. Here's another one. Show how the Christian faith can answer any legitimate challenge leveled against it. And this takes time to learn answers. For me, there were a couple key things I needed to know. Can the Bible answer this? So I did a study of science a few years ago. I'm not a scientist at all. But I thought, what are the main arguments that people use using science against the Christian faith, and do they hold any water? And come to realize that they do not, that the arguments from science are full of philosophical presuppositions about the non-existence of God, and that's not science. So I did a year of study at Villanova University in German philosophy, and I wanted to know, does philosophy have any objections to the Christian faith? Do we have weakness there? And after a year of that, I realized there are no arguments in philosophy. In fact, I was kind of stunned. This was doctoral level work at Villanova. Villanova is a highly esteemed philosophical school. And after a semester and a half, I thought, this is not what I thought it was going to be. I thought we were going to be searching for truth. I thought we were going to be asking important questions like, how do we know what we know? And instead, the more bizarre the question you could come up with, the more you were praised by the professor. So I used to hang out with the other students. I was older at this time. I was in my 40s. Most of them were late 20s. And one time while we were waiting for the classroom to open up, I said, "Can I ask all you guys a question?" I've been in the same class with them for 2 semesters. I said, "Do you guys ever get around to the question of truth?" And they all kind of looked down the end of the row to their brightest student. And he kind of answered for them. He said, "Nah, we're not really interested in questions of truth." I said, "Then why are you spending all this time and money getting your PhD in philosophy?" He kind of smiled. He said, "Well, to be honest with you, most of us would just want to land a cushy job teaching philosophy somewhere, drink fine wine, go to expensive parties." And he said, "Because chicks dig philosophy professors." Chicks dig philosophy. That's what he said. And I thought, oh, okay, philosophy has no arguments against the Christian faith. It's just a game for most people that play philosophy. Not that there aren't significant philosophical questions about faith and about life. There are. But there are no objections to the Christian faith for which there are not good answers. And we live in a time where there's so many resources online, books being published, podcasts, websites, videos. George told me how he's tormented by the amount of material out there and how he listens all the time. You could listen forever and still not learn anything. I'm sorry, everything. You're going to learn much. But the truth is, we don't have to have the answers for everything. What we need to do is put the ball in the court of the unbeliever and see what they can justify for their beliefs. And ultimately, if you don't know, say so. I still hear objections sometimes. I think, I have never heard that. After all my years of studying philosophy and apologetics, no one's ever asked that question before. So if you don't know, say, "That's a good question. I don't know. Let me go look it up for you, or let me get you an answer and come back." But realize your inability to answer a question doesn't negate the truth of Christianity. So then what do I do in conversation after that? And by the way, in just a few moments when we finish, we're going to take a break. And then the second hour, we're going to do some role play. I'm going to start by, if you want to, you can play the part of an unbeliever. You come up here and have a conversation. I'll show you how I would handle it. Then we're going to reverse roles. I'll play the part of the unbeliever, and the bold among you will come up, and you'll try to put into practice the things that we've learned, and we'll critique each other. Ooh, terrifying, isn't it? All the introverts now are going, "Oh, how do I get out of here without anyone seeing me?" It's okay. I'm a very nice unbeliever. I'd never insult. So here's what we want to do. One of the things you can do when you're thinking, where do I go in the conversation after that? I can address what's known as the magnetic point. So there's a wonderful book out by a British scholar. I just heard him speak recently at Westminster Seminary in Philadelphia. Making Faith Magnetic. 5 hidden themes our culture can't stop talking about. And he uses terms that are a little different, but we've all heard of these before. Origin, where did I come from? Purpose, why am I here? Meaning, what am I here? What's the reason or the purpose of life? Destiny, where am I going? Morality, what's wrong with the world? Redemption, how will this world be made right? He just uses different terms, but I'll use his terms. Many times when I'm talking to an unbeliever, after we get past this initial questioning, I'll start asking them questions like, totality, what is our purpose in life? Like, why are we here? And sometimes people will say, well, we're an accident of nature, or we're here to make the world beautiful. We're here just to make a contribution. And then I'm going to start asking those questions again. So why do you think that's our purpose in life? Here's another one. Norm, how should we live? That is, what makes something right and wrong? How should people live? Let me tell you, everyone you talk to believes or has an idea of how people ought to live. Even people that deny morals, they'll say, you should do that, you shouldn't do that. Anytime someone uses words like should, ought, must, those are moral terms. And my question is always, well, why? Well, we should be kind to one another. Why? I agree with you as a Christian. Again, whenever you can agree with them. I could agree with you as a Christian, but we actually take it further. Kindness is okay, but love is far stronger than that. Love lays down its life for its friend. Love lays down its life even for someone who is in opposition. Romans 5:8. So ask that person, so how do you think we know what's right and wrong in the world? How should people live? Let them, what they'll do is they will extend themselves to answer that question and then realize they've cut the branch off that they're sitting on. Because they've told you, I don't believe that there's a God. I don't believe there's any future judgment. I don't believe we, are accountable to anyone. And then we should do what is right and just. We should do what is good to other people. And I could say, I agree with you as a Christian, but that makes sense in my worldview, where there's a holy God who's revealed himself to us, who's revealed right and wrong. He's given us very clearly in written words, so we don't just know it inside. We also know objectively. And someday he'll hold us accountable for that. You want to hang on to those things, but you walked away from the ground of that. Here's another one. Deliverance. Is there a way out of the mess we're in? This comes up a lot of times when people say, oh man, did you see the news today? What a mess this world is. Oh, great opportunity. Yeah, I agree. What a mess. Did you hear about that shooting? Did you hear about that disease? Did you hear about that natural disaster? So what do you think is wrong with the world? What's going to make it right? Again, don't jump in and tell them your belief yet. Let them answer. Question them on that. You might even say, I think you got a few things right here, but I think what you're missing is this. Any kind of assurance of that. This is important because as Dan Strange, that's the guy's name, Dan Strange. He's a doctor, so he's Dr. Strange. He's a fantastic, I buy anything this guy writes. He's got great videos online. Yeah, so look up Dan Strange. And he's a British guy. I don't know if there's any other Dan Stranges out there, but he says everyone wrestles with these questions. Now, you might encounter someone that says, I don't want to talk about that, but most people I talk to are interested in sharing their opinion, right? We like to talk about ourselves, don't we? We like to share our opinion generally. Here's another one, destiny. Is there a way to control my life? Now, typically, destiny is portrayed or described as, where are we going? What's the end of everything? And it is partly that as well. But Dan Strange says it's also a question, is there a way to control my life? Is there a way for me to have any assurance that things are going to turn out okay? And he goes into what we've probably all heard the last few years, the amount of loneliness is growing in our world, the amount of isolation ever since the COVID shutdowns and the lockdowns, since the advent of the phone, where people are together and yet they're not. Dan Strange says, everyone is struggling with this question, is there a way to control my life? People who are battling addictions. Not just the big ones like drugs and alcohol, but video game addiction, Candy Crush. I'll name all the games I don't have a problem with, so I have to. Why do people get so into things? Because they're trying to find something that will bring satisfaction that they can control. And then finally, higher power. Is there something beyond? What's interesting is a few years ago, a well-known Canadian sociologist said we live in a disenchanted world. And he was right for a while. That the modern world, the 20th century, turned everything disenchanted. We no longer believed in the supernatural. Why? Because science and natural explanations take care of everything. Why did that happen? We can find a natural explanation for it. But what scholars are talking about now is a re-enchantment of our world. Dan Strange talks about this. There's an explosion of interest in crystals, in dream weavers, in seances, in mediums, in horoscopes, and all these things where people are believing. They might even say, I'm an atheist, and yet they have crystals hanging from their rearview mirror in their car. Why? Because they do actually believe in something else out there. And I think it's hardwired in us as people. We want there to be something outside this physical world. So whether it's the Jersey Devil or the abominable snowman or the chupacabra, or we want to believe there's something out there we can't explain. Why? Because that fascinates us, right? Why such interest in the Marvel Cinematic Universe? Well, not anymore. For so many years. Why? Because the thought of a superhero, someone with extraordinary abilities, or even in those movies, a threat that needs to be dealt with, and we call in someone who can answer the problem, who can solve the problem, who can defeat the enemy. Like, this is a narrative that people live by, and they tend to think of themselves in this way. And so if I'm talking to someone, I can ask them, so, do you believe in anything supernatural? Do you believe in anything that can't be explained? I mean, the growing interest in these, I know they have a different name for it now, but UFOs, right? There are some things we cannot explain. That you have credentialed Air Force, colonels who said, I've flown airplanes all my life and I've seen things I cannot explain. That interests people. Why? Because we have a longing for there to be something beyond the here and now. And so as I'm talking to someone, building a relationship or just in conversation with a stranger, I might look to one of these and ask the question. So do you think there's a way to, what do you think will solve the problems of the world? Let them talk. Many times people will often say, I really don't know. I want there to be something, but I don't know. And then, now we can begin to bring in the Christian worldview, the Christian gospel. Bring in the person of Jesus. And I'm right there with you. I long for there to know that there's something out there greater than this world, that I'm not just a biological machine that'll function for a certain number of years and then I die. I long for there to be meaning and purpose. Can I tell you where I found that? It's in Jesus. Amen. He's actually the one who came down. He is God who took on human flesh. He is a supernatural being, unlike anything we see in the movies. Yeah. And he didn't come down just to conquer a foe temporarily. He put that foe down. Yeah. This is where, as Los was saying before, many of you came in, one of the things I'm constantly working on is learning to not just defend the faith, but commend it. How do I share it in such a way that makes people see its wonder and glory and beauty? Can I tell you that I was enslaved to my desires, and Christ delivered me, and each day he is further delivering me, and I'm finding true freedom. Can I tell you that I despaired for many years? I had no purpose, and relationships went bad, and I was lonely, and I found Christ, and he has become to me the friend that will never leave me. He has come to be the captain of my soul, as Peter says. This is where we need to learn to describe the gospel well, because once you've helped to tear down their confidence in their worldview and their beliefs, we want to present Christ in all his glory, all his beauty, and pray that the Holy Spirit opens their eyes. Isn't that what Paul is always praying for the Ephesians and the Colossians, that God would open their eyes to see? He even says it here in 2 Corinthians, that the God of this world has blinded the eyes of those in the world, and we pray that the light of the glory of the gospel of Christ would shine. So this is what it looks like, and I guarantee if you start talking to unbelievers or continue talking to unbelievers this way, you will find conversations that go on a long time. And you'll be like I was the very first time inside, you're like, this works. How exciting. I didn't think this would ever really happen. Again, I forget what I shared with you last time, but last summer I was looking for something to do to bring me more in contact with unbelievers. So I started a philosophy reading group, and it went from June through December, and then we took a break. And the guy who came back most of the time was an attorney in Lancaster, takes his lunch break and comes down. And so we're reading Friedrich Nietzsche, who hates God, who said God is dead. And every week, because Nietzsche talks about Jesus, we talk about Jesus. And so far, I haven't seen any movement in this guy except the fact that he says, let's just keep doing this. Let's keep doing it. So under the guise of studying the most anti-Christian philosopher that ever lived, we are talking about Jesus every week. And this week, 2 others joined us for our conversations. If you're free, Tuesdays at noon, Prince Street Cafe at the big table. That's where we sit. And our goal is to keep bringing unbelievers and having them hear us, because sometimes other Christians come too, talk about Jesus as the answer for our needs and our desires. So I say we take 5-minute break, then come back, and we're going to do some role play. Anybody want to play the part of an unbeliever? Anybody have a... Okay. You want to? Okay, good. All right. I have about 12 different personalities and belief systems inside me, so we could do that later. But we'll start with this. What is your name? Juliet. Okay, so Juliet will play the part of an unbeliever, and I'll show you. Here's how I would try to talk with her. So go ahead and take a break for a few moments.
He knows your pain. Only God knows. He knows your heart. He knows what you're going through.
See, only a few know about the pain I feel. I bottle it up so that you don't see my fear. Cause being on the front line, as time unwinds, it gets closer. Every time I pick up the mic, better make sure my life is entwined with Christ. Cause as these words leave my lips, they're touching a life that might choose to serve Christ. My life becomes an object inside the glass bottle. The thoughts begin to follow. Better hope your closet ain't got too many skeletons. Cause even though Christ forgave, man won't care till you're laying flat in the grave. So I scuff my knees daily, going man to man like Champ Bailey. So as these words begin to surface, keep myself in worship. Cause only God knows the true intent of this person who dedicates his service to the one who spread his arms out and died for a purpose.
Only God knows what's written within the scrolls of my heart. So as the text flows, he knows the souls I'ma spark with this truth. Yeah, I was marked from my youth, hearing abs a statistic. Bark from the roof of my throne, thinking there's no use, I'm alone. It felt good, but I knew something's wrong, was violated. In fact, before my voice could crack, at a tender age, if I could take my choices back, I would've never let him touch me. But it's gone now, I forgave him. That's why I put it on the song now. This might have happened to you, cause it's more than a few that went through the same thing, playing the cool, holding in the pain. Look at Satan holding the chain. It's for the violator, ain't no sense in holding the blame. Cause we was all once lost, controlled by sin, but he paid the price so you could be sold to him.
Only God knows the pain that your heart is hiding. Inside you're crying, your soul is dying. Can be the one to wipe those tears. It's been years, but the time to change is now here. God knows the pain that your heart is hiding. Inside you're crying, your soul is dying. Can be the one to wipe those tears. It's been years, but the time to change is now here.
I couldn't cover my hurt if I tried. If you looked in my eyes, all you can see is the image of a tender boy crying in the dark. Manifest the hatred in my heart. Found refuge in persecution from the start. It's gotta be better than this. My whole life ball in my fist. Does anything besides pain exist? I'm like a flower, soiled in oasis. Gasping for a hint of life to give him some time and maintenance. Life tangled in the matrix, shouting out to the ancient Lord, how could your greatness create something so unworthy and then die for it? My mind's distorted, trying to uncover your mystery and how your wonders orchestrate like a symphony. Your forgiveness is the epitome of the word love, and compared to you, that's something that I have none of.
Your story's all screwed up, lies paralyze your life, and you wonder how you alive when pressure is applied. And when it gets heavier, it makes you think, is there even a God? Then your thoughts of being all alone, it sinks deeper. You're plotting suicide, calling on the reaper, and death right now might seem a little cheaper, but bloodshed for sins was free, and that's a keeper. I'm not the type to leave the truth in the dark, so I'ma let it be revealed, cause Christ is real, and the pain that you feel can't even compare to multiple lashes, stones plus the 3 nails. He did it for the human race. Every face, even those that cursed him and belittled his grace. He took our place on that cross, but still we'd rather look the other way with our eyes closed, rolling lost. The pain that your heart is hiding, inside you're crying, your soul is dying. Can be the one to wipe those tears. It's been years, but
Yep, testing, testing. Good. Good. All right, let's go ahead and get started again. Juliet, if you want to come up here.
You heathen unbeliever. Look at that face.
Do I need to speak into the mic or?
Yeah, you can, if you want to sit there, we'll pretend we're in a coffee shop or something. Before we get started, notice the very last thing on the handout there. It's kind of 6 steps in the apologetic process that I usually follow. Not always one after the other, depends on where the person is, but show an interest in, listen to them, show an interest in them as a person. Ask strategic questions. We talked about that. Enter their world. This is a really helpful thing. In other words, take enough time to ask questions about what they believe that you can enter their world and look around and see, okay, this is your world. There is no God, or God is everywhere and in everything. And then as you do that, think about, okay, what would that kind of world be like if everything was divine or a spark of the divine? Perform an internal critique. That is, begin to ask those questions. So in your worldview, how do you know when something's right or wrong? Or what do you think is going to solve the problem? And then, since you've entered their world, make them remain consistent with their worldview. So if they have an atheistic worldview, no God, and then they start to sneak in the divine, you have to say, well, wait a second. You said in your worldview you don't believe in God, but now you're talking about, we need divine grace from above. So what do you mean by that? So do that internal critique where you're showing the weaknesses of their worldview, knowing that there are going to be some. Present the glory and rationality of the Christian worldview. Here's what I believe as a Christian, or I agree with you and here's why. I disagree with you, here's why. Here's what the Christian worldview says. And then get to the person of Christ. Can I share with you who Jesus is, what he came to do? So that's kind of the general overall plan of a conversation. So let me... Can I move this around because I'm going to be facing this way? There we go. All right, so Juliet and I will imagine that we're at 30th Street Station in Philadelphia waiting for a train. It's crowded. There's nowhere to sit, but there's a high table. And I've bothered her by asking if I can share her table with my coffee and bagel. Okay. Do you mind if I sit here?
Oh, that's
Actually,
fine.
I'm going to stand because there's nowhere to sit. But are you coming or going?
I'm going.
Oh, where are you going?
I'm going to go see my sister
Oh, out of town or just in the area?
out of town.
Okay, good. Do you have a good relationship with her?
It's been hard in the past, but we're getting better now. She's been more open about her life and discussing that with me and wants to hear more about me. I actually this year came out as non-binary. So we've been talking about, sexuality and all that. And she's been really supportive, which has been good because the rest of my family hasn't been.
Oh, I can imagine that's difficult whenever your family, whenever conflict in family comes up, that's difficult.
It is very difficult. It's hard.
Yeah. So what were some of the things that led you to arrive at this conclusion or to believe that you're non-binary or feel that way?
So I've just never liked girl things. I always liked to get dirty and fight. And growing up, my dad always told me that I was like a son to him. And then my sisters were the girls and they'd like to play. And I would always I was the defender for my younger sister. So I just felt like I was more like a guy, but I don't think I'm completely a man either.
Okay. And how has that been through your teen years and adult years? What was the hardest, or did you just recently come to grips with this?
So I recently came to grips with this. I grew up in a Pentecostal church, and when I was in high school, I felt this way, but I would not have been allowed to express myself. I have ADHD, and my family took me to the church, and they prayed over me because they thought I was possessed.
Wow, that's amazing. So do you still hold on to any faith at all?
I don't. I believe in good vibes, and I have like little special things that I keep.
Yeah. And what do you use good vibes for? Like, just help me understand that.
I use good vibes to just be happy and feel centered, and the things that I keep that have good vibes it's from happy memories.
Yeah. Oh, that's good. Yeah, happy memories are really central to life, aren't they? Being able to look back on those things. Some of my happiest memories of my years growing up were definitely when things in my family were good and before my parents divorced. And there were some very few of those, so you hang on to those as something that matters a lot to you. So what was the process for you to let go of belief in God? Did it happen all at once or over time?
It happened over time. I think I never believed it, but then experiencing what I experienced and the abuse, it made me realize that there was no God. If things like that happened to me from people who are Christians.
So because there's evil and suffering, I mean, is it because you wonder, like, where was God? Why didn't he stop that?
Where was God? And then if God loves me, like people say, why would Christians, people who are supposed to represent them, treat me like that?
Yeah. Oh, I'm so sorry to hear that. It's really sad. I'm a Christian myself, and it grieves me to hear that the Christians failed to love in that way, because that's one of the commands of Christianity, is that we should love like God loves, and it's really sad when that is disappointed and let down. Can I ask you a question though? If you no longer believe in God, do you believe in any kind of like divine being or spirit or gods or supernatural?
I believe in aliens. I think they're definitely
Interesting.
aliens, but I don't think they're supernatural.
Okay. So they're just outside of our experience?
Yes.
Okay. Wow. Interesting. I mean, I've never really been a firm believer in aliens, but there's definitely things happening in the world that I cannot explain, and it makes me wonder, what's causing those. Let me ask you this, though. If there is no God, when you look at the suffering you've been through, and I assume you're well attuned to the suffering around the world, if there is no God, then would you agree that suffering is essentially meaningless, pointless, like there's no purpose in it?
I think we make purpose from it.
Oh, okay. What do you mean? What do you mean by that?
Bad things are going to happen to you either way, so you might as well get the most out of it.
Yeah. Well, I can agree that certainly in all of our suffering, we do have to make the best of it. What about people that can't seem to find any good? Maybe people that experience suffering and there's no hope of it ever being made right. There's no hope of them ever overcoming it. Do you have is there any comfort for them in your worldview?
I think people could come along and support them, but that would be their choice.
Yeah.
And I think people need to be more loving and respectful towards each other and look out for each other.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. But let me ask you this. In your worldview, or in your view, if there is no God, why should we care about one another? Is it just because it makes the world nice to live in?
It makes the world better, and it's the right thing to do.
Yeah. Now, when you say right thing to do, are you saying that there's some moral standard that we should abide by?
I think that there are things that we should do, and that there are things that it would be better if we didn't do them.
Yeah.
But we can't really tell people what they can and can't do.
Oh, okay. That's kind of puts you in a dilemma there, because you feel like people should treat one another nicely, but you really have no grounds to tell someone who chooses not to do that what they're doing is wrong. But my guess is you probably feel like when people are abusive or manipulative or exploit others, there's probably something inside you that says that's not right, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah. As a Christian, that makes sense, because I believe God has revealed his commands and his character to us, so that he calls us to live in such a way that we lay down our lives for each other and we love each other sacrificially. But if there's no one telling us how we ought to live, is there really any way for me to say to someone who's abusive and violent, you shouldn't do that? Because if I say, that doesn't make the world a nice place, what if they say we don't care? I mean, is there anything that you have in your view that can compel someone not to do bad things to other people?
I don't think so. I
Yeah.
would have to think about it.
Yeah. That's one of the dilemmas, I think, whenever we try to figure out our morals from within our world. I think we need something outside of our world that shows us what is objectively true and false, or right and wrong, so that we know. Otherwise, I mean, most of the people I meet are kind. Like, I really appreciate you letting me sit here with you. But there's a lot of evil people in the world as well, and there are a lot of people that would happily exploit others, and yet most of us think that the world shouldn't be that way. Wouldn't you agree?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And I think there's something intuitive down in our hearts that says the world is not the way it's supposed to be. But if there is no God, really, I mean, the way you look at the world, everything is the way it's supposed to be. Natural selection runs everything. The weak lose out to the strong. But I feel like most of us want there to be a different world, a better world. Yeah. What do you think will make the world better?
If people are kind to each other.
Yeah. I agree. I'd much rather have a kind neighbor than an unkind neighbor. But is there any hope that that will ever happen, do you think?
I don't think so, no.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree, with the exception that because I believe in a God, not just a God who's out there somewhere, but a God who has come down to be with us. The Bible tells us that God loved us so much, he gave his son. Do you know much about Jesus?
I am familiar with the story of Jesus.
You are. Okay, that's true. You grew up in a Pentecostal church. Most people in the world who've heard of Jesus don't really have strong objections to him, but what they don't realize is he didn't come just to set an example. He came to deal with our deepest problem, which is our hearts. You know, like you said, it'd be nice if everyone just looked out for each other and loved each other, but we know that's not really how it happens. And Jesus came to show us who God is and how much God loved us, and he came to deal with our number one problem, which is sin. That is, we've broken God's commands. Do you believe in sin still or not?
I don't know if I believe sin in the way the Bible talks about it.
Oh, okay. So how would you understand sin? What would sin be?
I think sin would be when people are unkind and judgmental towards others.
Yeah, I mean, that's definitely the case. God tells us to love one another, and any failure to do that is sin. Would you consider something like theft to be sin, people stealing from each other?
That depends.
Oh, it depends. Okay, how so?
Well, like, never mind, I don't want to go there.
That's okay. At some point in the conversation, we reach an impasse where this is going to open the door for a lot more information. So let's pause right there.
Okay.
Great job. No, stay here. She did not go easy on me, as you can tell. So what did you notice that I did in regard to how I responded to her? What were some of the things that you noticed I did?
You had a question for every statement that she said,
Yeah.
and you were very, very cautious to not ask the question right after she made a statement. You would let her talk, and at the right, it seemed like at the right moment you would follow up the question.
Like now you're going to have to say all that again.
You ask good questions without, in other words, you ask good questions at the right time. You didn't jump right in, and based on your body language, from what I could see, you're very calm, which I think helps with the follow-up questions. Your body language definitely has something to do with how well others receive those questions. I think you did a great job. That's one of the things that I noticed that you kept doing, and you gave room for her to talk.
Good. Yeah, we always want to listen. Like, don't have your question ready to go as soon as they stop talking. Take a moment to think about it and say, that's interesting. Because we genuinely do want to listen. My struggle, and struggle for many people, is we start to formulate an answer while they're talking. And it's so hard to stop yourself from doing that. And just think about, if I truly care about this person as a person and not a prize to be had, but a person, then I'm going to really listen. And I might have to think for a few moments and come up blank with what to say. But asking follow-up questions always helps to draw them in. So it takes practice to do that.
You seemed very sympathetic, because and didn't make yourself seem like an enemy, or you're trying to be combative, but really trying to hear what she was thinking, her ideas, but also just kind of just being sympathetic to her situation. She said that she was having family issues, and I can understand why that would be difficult, and not be abrasive or just not sympathetic. So I think that's good to win people. You know what I mean? They're
Yeah, showing genuine care for them as a person, it's so important, because people know if you're trying to sell them something. Our group from LBC, we have a group of students that go out on Friday nights downtown, sometimes other places. And when I first started to talk with them, they had a very salesman-like approach. And I kind of helped them to get past that, to show genuine interest. And they said, "Oh, Dr. Farnham, our conversations lasted so much longer because people felt like we were genuinely interested." And then you have to work at that. I don't know if you felt that as in your character. I was trying not to be, sometimes you can be too pushy or too inquisitive, and then the person starts to wonder why you're asking so many questions. But you do want to show a genuine interest. And truthfully, sometimes you meet a person that says, "I really don't like to talk to strangers." Then that's okay. You did what God asked you to do, which was start a conversation.
This might be saying the same thing that Rome said a little differently. You weren't judgmental. So no matter what crazy things she told you, you just acted like, yeah, that's, of course, that you're non-binary and you just were very non-judgmental, which I think is, especially in this day and age, the most important thing is to be tolerant. So if you come across as judgmental, I think it makes people very defensive and I'm sure less likely to share. Yeah,
very good. They might tell you that they're involved in something really sinful or wicked or broken, and you can't act surprised. Now, if they ask you, "What do you think about this?" You can go back and sit down if you want. Thank you. Let's give Juliet another hand. If they ask you straight up, "What do you think about this?" you have to tell the truth. I think that homosexuality is wrong. I think that sleeping around is wrong. I think that, cheating is wrong, or things like that. But if you show an interest in them as a person, and ask questions how they got to where they are in life, that will many times they'll stop thinking about what you think and they'll respond to your question. George? Lois is going to get you on camera.
Yeah, I just found how it was just organic. There was nothing forced. It was just the flow of the conversation. "Hey, how are you? I'm interested in your life." And I noticed that you focused more on, you highlighted her. There, so then that way you kind of prepared yourself to be at a good headspace when you're speaking to her. Because I noticed that it was nice and organic and free flowing and nice, that it wasn't anything threatening. It wasn't also you were backing up on what you believed too, because that was another thing also, because you weren't too passive. Yeah, you were kind of just the right pressure, like you said, the chiropractor, Yeah,
that's right.
So yeah, that's what I noticed.
That's a good point. And every person is different. Some people you can get to Jesus very quickly. They might ask you. Others you've got to say, "Lord, give me a path to talk about Christ." And most of the time that comes in when they say something that is right. "Well, I just think there's so much evil and suffering in the world." I agree. Or "I just think that we ought to love one another." I agree, and here's why. Eventually they're going to mention something that will intersect with Christian faith, and that's where you say, "As a Christian, I agree, and here's why." And then stop talking and go back to them. That's the hardest part, because we love to monologue, because we start to get nervous and we just keep talking. And think about, this is a calm conversation. I'll talk for a little while, I'll take a break and ask a question. And again, this is what leads to conversations that I have with unbelievers that last 45 minutes, an hour, total strangers. And or people that it's an ongoing conversation, so there's less pressure.
So I don't have any comments. I have two questions.
Yes.
My first question is, what questions would you stay away from? Like maybe something that's too personal, or do you kind of just wait to see what questions they do answer and go from there? So that's my first question. Like, what questions are too personal? The second is this approach for train station, airplane, cafe, and not street evangelism where you have less time?
Good question. Let me answer the first one first. If you keep your questions focused on what they believe, then that often keeps you from getting too personal. However, that person might open up and start talking. I've had real mental health issues, and I was in rehab for a while. And if someone said that to me, I would say, "Tell me, what was that like? How did you get through it?" So let them take the lead in how personal it gets. But in regard to their beliefs, the things that they hold to, most people are not offended if you ask them about what they believe. It's a great question. And the second question was?
Is this approach more of an
okay.
coffee train station?
Yeah, the students at LBC now use this downtown. They're not trying to stop. They're not trying to stop people walking down the street and saying, "Can I have a minute?" They're looking for people sitting down and trying to engage them in that way. I carry Gospels of John with me, so if I only have a minute or I'm on an elevator, I can say, the other day I stopped and ordered food, and they brought the food out to the car. It was this place up off heading towards State College, and they brought the food out. And so this woman was busy. I didn't want to detain her. She gave me the food. I said, "Can I give you this? It's a book of the Bible. It's the Gospel of John. It tells a story about Jesus." So I didn't even get into any questions because she was in a hurry. But anytime someone's willing to talk, you can dive into this in just a couple minutes, and it may or may not go anywhere. Great question. Any others?
I think I got one.
Okay.
One of the challenges I've had when I go up to people and talk is my appearance. So when I say, "Hey, can I talk to you about something?" it's a little different. So that's why I have my wife start the conversation and I'll follow afterwards. So how much self-awareness do we need of ourselves when we approach someone and talk? So what are some ways that could be helpful for us to be aware of ourselves and how we come across to somebody?
Yeah, I have that same issue because of my height. Some people find it very intimidating, and I have to, I always try to not tower over them. I don't stand over them and say, "Hey, can I ask you a question?" So body language. You're right, Los. If someone might be intimidated, I might say, "Hey, my name is Mark, and we're just out here on the streets talking to people about what they believe. Could you give me a few minutes?" In other words, in the first 10 seconds, I want to speak to them in such a way that relieves any anxiety they might have about who I am. I might even say, I'm from Christ Alone Fellowship. It's a church in the area. We're just asking people what they believe about God. Could you give me a few minutes? That way they know that, because we've all been accosted by people before, right? Can I get you anything? And, pull open the code and they got their array of different things. And, they're worried you're going to ask them for money or something like that. So I think coming right out with something right away would be a good way. Or, just wearing something that, alleviates the fear. If you're wearing an Insane Clown Posse T-shirt, that's a little terrifying. So maybe something like a smiley face or Everyone Worships shirt or something like that. But yeah, think about your appearance. No, don't get rid of the beard. I wouldn't even know who Los was if he lost that beard. Okay, so what will make Los less intimidating is if he weaves flowers through his beard. You guys seen that, right?
You look like a whole fanboy. Don't do it.
Hi.
Hi.
I really loved that, and this isn't a question, this is just a comment. I love that it felt like a podcast when you were talking to her instead of a debate. I've seen lots of debates, and I felt a little nervous because she brought up like, "Oh yeah, I'm non-binary. I believe in aliens," and I'm just like, "Oh man, I would feel a little weird." I'm like, I don't know what to do, but you kept the focus on her, and you just asked her questions. You would talk a little bit when it felt relevant, but most of the time, you allowed her to answer and stuff like that, and everything felt really chill. So I really enjoyed that.
Okay. Yeah, one of the things, it's taken me a long time to get to the point where you have to take the pressure off yourself to get so far in the conversation. This is where really the work of the Holy Spirit is the one that's doing the work. So I can just have a normal conversation with someone, and if it doesn't go anywhere, I don't walk away defeated like, because if I'm focused on showing an interest, I like the phrase holy curiosity. When I meet someone, I ought to have a holy curiosity about them. This is someone made in God's image. They have their own unique story. It might be bizarre in my mind, but at the very least, I ought to be interested. Like, tell me, what's it like to be, a circus performer? Or what's it like to be someone who likes to climb in the sewers at night and surprise people through their toilet bowls? I don't know. Like, don't be shocked by anything people say. Show an interest in them. And then remember, this is someone for whom Christ died. So I need to love them. Now, if you're ever in a position where you feel endangered by the person, you should follow your gut. Something's not right about this person. I'm going to head out. Sometimes our students go downtown and I say, guys, don't be walking down into an alley, to talk to someone if you've got one of the girls with you. Gentlemen, look out for the ladies here who are evangelizing, and don't go places that aren't, safe. But most of the time, just show an interest. Like, I'm curious to know about this person's life. And just trust the Lord to open up the door for the conversation.
That was actually going to be my question.
Okay.
What are some things that you recommend in regards to like safety, making sure that you're being aware of your environment and you're being safe. You're not, especially for a female who wants to share the gospel, but making sure that she doesn't endanger herself or is talking with like someone that's psychotic or,
Yes. Well, I have a tongue-in-cheek answer, which is stay strapped or get clapped, but that's not always. Sorry. Did she? Yeah, take it. Yeah. So follow your gut when it comes to, is this a safe or a rational person? So one time, I've spent a lot of time downtown. One time I was in that part of that next to the trust where that the rabbit and the dragonfly used to be. Is that where you guys started? Yeah. So if you go up the stairs, it's like a strange mixture of inside shops and stuff. I was up there one time. I was with my son, who's fairly big, but he was only in high school at the time. And we got talking to this guy, and he starts telling us he was in the Army, and he was acting all fidgety. There was no one else around. We're in that barren hallway up there. And something inside me says, I don't trust this guy. He was clearly an addict on something. And I'm thinking, if he busts out a knife, we're both dead. And so I just followed that gut instinct, and we just kept walking. Another time I was at Square One and started a conversation with a lady. And we were talking for like 25 minutes. And it was a weird conversation. She was saying odd things. And I'm thinking, this is so odd, but I'll keep talking. No, she didn't. She had a hospital bracelet. She'd just been let out of the psych ward. Sorry, that behavioral award. And I realized after a little while, okay, the reason she's giving weird answers is she's not all there. So I would just say pay attention to that. And if you don't feel safe, say, all right, Lord, you're going to have to save them because I'm going to have to move on. So I would say don't go places alone if there's any real danger. But in other places, the Spirit of God might give you a peace, like you're okay, you're safe there. Yeah, especially with street evangelism. I always recommend being in groups where people can see you. She's over there talking to him, and I'm just going to keep my eye on her.
I just have a quick question. Is there people you won't approach, like if you see them like they're stoned out of their mind or drunk?
Yeah. Is there someone I won't approach? Yeah, I've talked to drunk people before and high people, but if they're way over the top, I realize nothing I say is getting through. I obviously don't approach teenage girls to talk to them about the Lord. It's just in our day and age, you got to be really careful. I talk to teenage young men, but we all have to be careful about that because of the way the world perceives and just because that there are creepos out there. But I'll talk to any teenager because I've learned that most teenagers are intimidated by adults. So if I'm the first one to say hello, again, I won't talk to a teenage girl on the street alone. But if there's several girls and, they're sitting there or we strike up conversation, that's a different thing altogether. But yeah, try to avoid anything inappropriate. I hate to say this, but if there's a woman there who's really inappropriately dressed, I may or may not start a conversation, but I want to make sure I'm in a public place. Yeah. Or people with big beards freaks me out. So.
Hey, Mark. What do you do when you have a apologetic or evangelistic encounter with someone who's not necessarily an unbeliever, but like, say a believer, Jehovah's Witness, or a Muslim who says that the basis for their worldview is the Quran or the Watchtower? Do you just start to, I guess, compare the texts and the truthfulness of where they came from?
You can if you know them well enough. I don't. It's not an area, comparative religion is not really an area especially. I know a little bit about those religions. But if someone like a Jehovah's Witness comes to my door, I'll give them a few moments to present their beliefs, but then I'll ask them, can you offer me anything better than what the gospel offers? In the gospel, I can confess to God that I am completely undeserving, and he gives me salvation as a free gift. Do you have anything like that? And of course, they don't. You've got to earn that through good works. Same with a Muslim. So to tell them, listen, what kind of God is it? I'll play the reverse card. What kind of God is it that tells you if you're good enough, you'll get to heaven, but never tells you in this lifetime when you've done enough, so you're always left guessing? That doesn't sound like a loving God. Can you imagine a parent doing that to a kid? If you're good enough, you can stay with us, but if you're not good enough, we're going to throw you out in the street. Well, how do I know I'm good enough? Just be as good as you can. So I'll try to play that card with them and say, here's the beautiful message of the gospel: is Christ is the only one that's good enough, and therefore because he paid the price, then I can have assurance. Because no other, it's one thing I do know about world religions. No other religion in the world tells you can know for sure in this lifetime if you've done enough. So they always live with either fear and guilt, or on the opposite end, self-righteousness and pride. So the one is based on how good I am, the one is based on how bad I am. But even in those religions, that still doesn't tell you if you've done enough. And know that anybody who worships another religion has to live with that constant fear. Yeah. You're welcome. Got a few more. We might save the reverse role play for next time. Okay. If we have, we'll take a few minutes and do that.
How do you share the faith in the workplace? Because some workplaces are kind of hostile towards the Christian faith.
Yeah. Yeah, that's tough. My wife works at the hospital, and has to be very careful what she can and can't do. What she's found very fruitful is her love and kindness and thoughtfulness toward others opens doors. I don't know how that plays with dudes at work, but even for men, just showing care and concern for people. You know, at some point, this person's going to hit something in their life that they cannot deal with. And if they know you're a person that listens and you're willing to talk and you show concern for them, that's the goal. But when they do open the door, go through that door and say, hey, I would love to tell you about what changed my life sometime if you'd ever like to hear it. Or, yeah, I used to think that way too, and God's really changed my thought. One thing that's really helped me in that is there was a guy who came to Lancaster Bible College for a missions conference named Kevin Kling, I think was his name, Kevin King. And he said what he learned to do in every situation was just turn up the volume on his Christianity. He didn't mean he got louder, but he just said, I just say things now like, man, I've been praying about that for a long time. And he said, I get strange looks. He said one time he was getting his eyes examined. He said they'd put those drops in his eyes, and they were stretching his eyes open, and there was a technician in there with him, and he's like, Lord, give me something to say. He said, I couldn't think of anything to say to bring up the gospel or anything like that. So he said, I finally just blurted out, why do you think I have this problem? Did I sin or did my parents sin? He's quoting John 9. And he said he couldn't turn and look because his eyes were in this thing. The woman is off here. He said there was a long pause. And then she said, I don't know, you'll have to ask the doctor that. He said, sometimes I say dumb things just to see if there's an interest, but he said, I just try to be a little more vocal. And that really convicted me because a lot of times when people hear that I had a kidney transplant, they'll ask me about it, and sometimes they'll say, yeah, I'm really thankful. I'll just say that. I'm thankful that my brother-in-law donated. But I've been trying to say now more often, we prayed for years for that, and God brought my brother-in-law into our life to do that. And that's all sometimes you can do at a workplace is just plant a seed. But you'll be surprised how often then someone in trouble will come to you and say, listen, I know you're religious. Could you pray for me? And you got to be patient there. That's a great question. Bria, did you have a?
No, I'm just playing with my hair.
She's doing that next to me. You notice that?
Yeah.
Cruel woman.
Okay, I just had a quick question because so with you and Jet, it was very Juliet. It was very calm and peaceful.
Jet, is that her nickname?
Yeah.
Wow, what a cool nickname. Jet ski.
But if Jet were to get maybe defensive or get more like offended or intense, like would you keep going or pull out? Like when do you know?
Yeah.
When to
it's
maybe
a good question.
Stop.
If she turned antagonistic to me, like, why are you keep asking me about non-binary? I would probably say I'm really curious. I've not met many people who've been through this, and I just would like to know what life is like for you, like show that genuine concern. But if she got more antagonistic, I would probably at some point say, listen, I didn't mean to upset you. I'm just interested in people, and I just want to tell you that God loves you. I care for you, and just want you to know that, whatever struggle you're going through, God understands. Might try to back out that way if it gets too intense. It's a good question. Okay. Anybody want to play the part of the Christian? I'll play the part of the unbeliever. We'll just do it for a few minutes. I'm a really nice unbeliever. I'm not mean at all. Los? No. Oh, okay. I thought you were walking over here. We should make him do it, though, shouldn't we? Someone else can handle the camera, right?
Go, Carla, go.
All right.
Pretend he's at the abortion clinic, girl.
Okay. So you're a father.
Let's just pretend we're at Prince Street Cafe, and so we're standing at a table because there's nowhere to sit.
Am I approaching you?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Hey,
you just strike up a conversation. I'm good. Can you believe how crowded it is in here?
No, I can't.
Yeah.
It's a random day, and
Yeah. But it's worth it. I love this coffee shop.
Oh my goodness, yeah. Such good food.
Yep.
Coffee.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That tends to happen at a coffee shop.
Yeah. You would think so. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So how are you doing today?
I'm good. How about you?
I'm doing good.
Yeah.
Yeah. I've been pregnant for a while now.
Oh, congratulations. I didn't want to say anything just in case that was not the case.
Right. People get offended. So
I
quickly.
think that's, that's so wonderful. I'm going to, when I get home, I'm going to burn some incense for you.
Oh, wow.
That hopefully everything will go good, that you'll have good luck with the baby.
Oh, okay. What do you think that does?
I'm kind of like into the earth religions, and I have crystals in my home, and I arrange them just right, and I burn incense, and I have a skylight. I look out to the moon, so I'm very into spirituality.
Oh wow! What type? Can you explain to me what you mean by spirituality?
Yeah, earth religions, kind of like Wicca, witchcraft, warlocks, things like that. I kind of got into that, in my teen years through Dungeons and Dragons, and I just kind of believe that there's enchantment in the world, and I'm kind of like trying to tap into. There's like a power in the universe, like a vibe. And just trying to kind of ride that wave a bit and get connected.
Get connected. Okay.
Yeah.
Get connected to what? You said enchantment. That's what I heard
Yeah.
you say, right?
Yeah. Like, I don't know. There's have you ever heard like an electronic buzz? Like, like electricity. Zzz, that low. I kind of feel like there's that in the universe. Like there's wonder and divine all around us. And I'm just trying to figure that out.
Oh,
trying to so my practices kind of help me get align my chakras and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah. So I heard you say you're into Wicca and crystals and all these things.
Yeah.
And you just said you want to align your chakras. What does this do for you?
It kind of makes me feel connected. Like I think we live really separate lives and isolated lives as people. I think our biggest problem is we've lost this interconnectivity.
Oh, wow.
You know, have you ever seen the movie Avatar?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. So, like, I believe that's real. So I'm trying to figure out, how do I find connection with the power in the world and with other people? Like, I think that's what's wrong with the world, is people are just not, you know, one with each other.
Okay. So you said that's a problem. Why do you think it's a problem that people are isolated?
Because I think, I don't know, I'm still kind of learning this, but I kind of feel like we all have this connection with the divine that we're supposed to have. But through technology, I mean, I'm not against all technology, but technology has made it worse. Yeah. And I don't know, just hatred in the world. I feel like there's not this connection that there should be, like peace on earth and, you know, love and all that stuff, good vibes and things like that. Like, I've experienced moments in my life where I felt that way with other people. And I just feel like, why can't we have that all the time, you know?
Right, yeah. It really sucks because,
Yeah.
you know, COVID happened and, you know, I could totally relate to you when you say that you felt lonely. And
Yeah.
even talking about crystals and stuff and horoscopes and stuff, there was a certain time where I myself used to believe
Really?
and trust in those things. Yeah.
Wow. So what made you stop that?
Yeah, so now I'm a Christian. I'm a Christian today, and I've come to put my trust and faith in Jesus.
Okay.
And you had said, you know, that it is a problem. I completely agree that it is a problem. You know, that there's things that are wrong with the world.
Yeah.
But I want to hear more. You said why. I want to hear why you think it's a problem. Like,
Yeah.
do you believe in right and wrong? Because you said also that, you know, nature.
Yeah, right and wrong, I'm not so sure about, because, you know, like Christianity condemns things like Wicca and earth religions, but I think there's a lot of potential there for us to, you know, reunite with the earth and get connected. And I, you know, I'm all for Jesus. I think Jesus was like this cosmic, you know, creature who kind of came down as like an avatar between the divine and the earth. So, yeah, I think the world of Jesus as this, you know, kind of this avatar to show us the way, kind of like the Dalai Lama or Siddhartha Gautama Buddha, like enlightened masters. That's the way I see Jesus. And that's what we need to be reconnected and enlightened. So I'm kind of trying to do that.
You definitely have an interesting point. As a Christian, I would ask you, why do you believe that Jesus is, you know, a spiritual master or guide? Why do you? Yeah,
I mean, I believe in miracles. Like, I know a lot of people that don't. My friends don't. They think I'm lunatic. But I feel like the world is full of power and that miracles happen all the time. And Jesus was a miracle worker. I believe when it says that. So I don't doubt that at all. And I just feel like he might have some things to say that will help me toward enlightenment. Like, I've studied the writings of Gandhi and some of the others like that. So I feel like all these things are little like pieces of the puzzle. Okay. Jesus is a big piece of the puzzle to yeah.
To the
yeah, to the answer, the vibe, yeah.
Yeah. Why? And I'm sorry I'm asking you so many questions. I'm really interested.
Oh no, I love to talk about it, but most people won't talk to me about it because they think I'm nuts.
I know, right? A lot of people are too afraid to be uncomfortable.
Yeah.
And, you know, and really question why we
That's right.
what we believe and why we believe it. But you also said, you know, this big picture. What is this big picture you're talking about? Like the universe? You claim nature?
Yeah, that's where I'm not really sure. It's kind of vague. I just feel like we were made for some kind of connection with all things. And so the universe, yeah, but I don't mean just like planets in outer space. I mean, there's something out there beyond us, and that's what I feel like I'm trying to find connection through all these practices I'm doing.
Oh, okay.
Magic and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Even a little, you know, other things like that.
Oh yeah, I don't blame you. I was there. I used to take drugs too.
Oh, I didn't mean drugs. No, I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. I'm messing with you now. Yeah. Like for a while I got into mushrooms and everything, and I thought that was the way, but I'm not sure that's really the way. To me, it's more an internal enlightenment of the heart and mind, and those things can help you sometimes, but yeah, so you don't do that anymore, huh?
No, I don't. Yeah.
Wow.
God really transformed my life. I was using those things as yourself, similar, seeking like answers and higher powers, and also seeking, pleasure and running away from my problems as well. You mentioned, a lot of loneliness. Those psychedelics were helping me to find answers about, why was I so depressed? Why was I so anxious? There are some days are better than others, of course, but as a Christian, now I know the truth, and I'd love to share with you why,
Yeah, so what did you find in, I think of Christianity, I think of like cathedrals and really boring church services. Like, it's amazing that you went from what I'm doing now to that. Like,
right, absolutely.
Well, what was it?
Completely agree. It was a complete transformation. And
okay, we'll stop there for the sake of time. You're doing really good. So, let's give her a round of applause. And you probably didn't expect I would be that kind of person, right? Because everyone expects I'm going to play the atheist, but I have 2 New Age type characters. The other one is totally like chill, man, dude.
Right.
Yeah.
Like,
but no, you did it. You did a good job of exploring and asking questions to get me explain, and you were asking, these type of questions. Like, you did a really good job, and your demeanor was friendly. That's good. Any other observations?
Do you want the mic?
Oh, do we?
Just gonna say. I was gonna say something real quick.
You can sit down if you want. Thank you.
Just,
you did a great job.
Just knowing Carla, I feel like if it was a real life situation, she would probably be like less like, how you say, like defensive, but more like forward. What do you think? So yeah, she's like, yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
I feel like I got trapped out now. Okay. That's all I wanted to say.
You did a great job showing interest. I mean, I was trying to be a little bit weird, and you didn't bat an eye to that. You just showed an interest, and I mean, that's what we have to do. Is people live very different lives, and you mentioned Jesus, and you challenged me on some things. So I mean, I can't think of anything that you could have done better. It's great.
Yeah, she did a great job. What I did notice is at first, and we probably would have all done it sitting in that chair, but she had a response for everything you said at first, and then she realized it and started thinking, okay, I should probably, act like I'm interested in what he's saying. So that was good that she noticed that, and I think she was thinking too. It seemed as if she was thinking, like, what he just said, is there something that I can pull Christ into that situation, hoping that her question would cause you to say something where she could pull Christ in it.
Yes.
So that was hard.
And you were patient.
Yeah.
You waited until there was something there when I said, I feel like we need to be connected to something out there. Like, there you go. That's the end right there. You did a great job. All right. Well, I don't want to keep you. It's 8:30. You didn't sign up to stay here longer than that. So shall I pray? And then, Los, do you have anything to say or any announcements or anything?
Speaking to this mic. Who has the book? All right. Did anybody finish chapter 1? Okay, we got to get to it. So let's work on chapters 2 and 3. So next time we come through, it'd be pretty cool to see if we can get some thoughts. But at the end of this, it'd be good for us to finish the book so we can really chop at the end and really discuss it. So I want to thank Mark for coming through. Let's give him a good hand. And can you please pray for our exit?
Thank you. That. All right. I can't come in July, so we have 2 more times in June, and we'll wrap up the basic part of everything. Then we'll do more role play next time. Next time we'll talk about the problem of evil and suffering, which is the number 1 objection. We'll address that, then do role play. And then the last night we might touch on like historical reliability or something like science, but we'll have a chance to have much more discussion that night too. Let's pray. Lord, we rejoice in the amazing message that the gospel is, the amazing person that you are, Jesus, and remind us daily of your love for the world, your love for the people around us, and open our mouths. Lord, give us great wisdom. Give us a holy curiosity about every person we meet and a love for them. And Lord, help us to be willing to start conversations, even if they don't go anywhere or we are rejected. Because we know that some people will respond, some people will talk. So encourage us, keep Satan from discouraging us, and give us a confidence not in ourselves, but in the power of the gospel and the work of the Holy Spirit. Help us this week to have conversations with